For the last 50 years, the script was pretty simple. Graduate high school, go to college, get a degree, get a job, and then slowly build your life from there. That was the formula. It was the safest path, the most predictable path. And for a long time, it actually worked. A college degree statistically meant higher income, more stability, and better career opportunities. Parents believed in it, schools pushed it, and society basically treated it like the default setting for adulthood. If you didn't go to college, people would ask what went wrong. But something strange has been happening over the last few years. Quietly but very noticeably, Gen Z has started stepping away from that path. Not everyone, obviously. Millions of students still enroll in universities every year, but the numbers are shifting, and the mindset around college is changing faster than most people realize. More young people are questioning whether 4 years and tens of thousands of dollars in debt actually make sense anymore. And the interesting part isn't just that Gen Z is skipping college. The interesting part is what they're doing instead. Because the traditional narrative says that if you don't go to college, your options are extremely limited. Maybe you take a low-paying job. Maybe you bounce between different kinds of work without much stability. Maybe you struggle financially for years. That's the fear that kept previous generations locked into the degree path. But Gen Z grew up in a completely different environment. They grew up with the internet. They grew up watching people build careers online, start businesses from their bedrooms, launch brands on social media, learn skills from YouTube, and make money in ways that simply didn't exist 20 years ago. So instead of asking, what happens if I don't go to college, a lot of young people are starting to ask a different question. What else could I do with those 4 years? Because 4 years is a long time. If you take someone who's 18 years old and give them 4 uninterrupted years to learn skills, experiment with projects, and build things on the internet, the outcome could look very different than sitting in lecture halls accumulating debt. Now, to be clear, this isn't an anti-college rant. There are still careers where a degree is absolutely necessary. If you want to become a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, or a scientist, college is obviously still part of the path. Those fields require formal training and credentials for a reason. But what Gen Z is starting to realize is that a massive percentage of modern jobs don't actually require a degree anymore. What they require are skills. And skills today can be learned in far more places than a university. You can learn video editing from YouTube. You can learn coding from online platforms. You can learn marketing by running real campaigns on the internet. You can learn design by building projects. You can learn business by actually starting something. And when you combine that with the fact that college tuition in many countries has exploded in price, the calculation starts to look very different. Imagine 2 18-year-olds starting the next chapter of their life. The first person goes to a traditional university. They spend 4 years studying, potentially accumulating that, and by the time they graduate, they're 22 years old with a degree and maybe some internship experience. The second person decides not to go to college. Instead, they spend those same 4 years experimenting with online skills. They learn content creation, freelancing, digital marketing, coding, or e-commerce. They try different things, fail at a few, get better at others, and slowly start building income streams or work experience. By 22, that second person might already have 4 years of real-world experience in a skill that the internet values. That's the trade-off Gen Z is thinking about. And when you start looking at what young people are actually doing instead of college, a few clear patterns start to appear. The first path a lot of Gen Z is taking is freelancing. Platforms like Upwork, Fiverr, and other freelance marketplaces have made it possible for people to sell skills directly to clients anywhere in the world. Things like graphic design, video editing, copywriting, website development, social media management, and dozens of other services can all be done remotely. For someone who's motivated, freelancing becomes a real-world classroom. Instead of learning from textbooks, you're learning from actual projects and clients. You learn how to communicate, how to deliver results, how to solve problems, and how to improve your craft. And you get paid while doing it. Another path Gen Z is exploring is content creation. 10 years ago, saying you wanted to be a YouTuber or a creator sounded ridiculous to most people. It felt unrealistic, like wanting to become a professional athlete. But the creator economy has exploded. There are millions of people now earning income through YouTube, TikTok, newsletters, podcasts, online communities, and other platforms. Not everyone becomes famous, but you don't actually need millions of followers to build a sustainable income anymore. Some creators monetize through ads, others through memberships, consulting, sponsorships, digital products, or communities. The point is that content itself has become a skill and a career path. Another route Gen Z is exploring is entrepreneurship. Starting a small online business today is dramatically easier than it used to be. You don't need a physical storefront. You don't need massive capital. With tools like Shopify, digital payment systems, and social media marketing, someone can launch a small business from a laptop. Some people build e-commerce brands. Others sell digital products like templates, guides, or tools. Some start niche communities or newsletters. Some build small software tools. None of these paths guarantee success, but they offer something college doesn't always provide: immediate feedback from the real world. Then there's another category that's growing quietly but very quickly: skilled trades and alternative education paths. For decades, society pushed the idea that university degrees were the only respectable option. Meanwhile, trades like electricians, plumbers, mechanics, welders, and other technical professions were often overlooked. But the reality is that many of these jobs are incredibly valuable, difficult to automate, and often pay extremely well. At the same time, there's actually a shortage of skilled workers in many of these fields because so many people were pushed toward university degrees instead. Gen Z is starting to notice that. Instead of taking on huge amounts of student debt, some young people are choosing apprenticeships or trade schools where they learn practical skills and enter the workforce much faster. And here's where the bigger cultural shift becomes really interesting. For the first time in a long time, success isn't tied to one specific path anymore. Previous generations had a narrow definition of what a successful career looked like. You went to college, got a degree, worked for a company, climbed the ladder, and maybe stayed there for decades. But Gen Z grew up watching the internet completely reshape how work functions. You can be a freelancer working with clients around the world. You can be a creator building an audience online. You can run a small digital business. You can combine multiple income streams instead of relying on one employer. Work has become more flexible, more decentralized, and in many cases, more skill-based rather than credential-based. And that shift naturally makes the four-year college decision feel less automatic. But there's an important reality check that needs to be said here. Skipping college doesn't automatically mean success. In fact, it can be harder in some ways. When you go to university, there's structure. There are professors, deadlines, classes, and a clear roadmap of what the next 4 years look like. When you skip college, you're responsible for building that structure yourself. You have to decide what skills to learn. You have to stay disciplined without anyone forcing you to show up. You have to deal with uncertainty and failure much earlier. That's why this path works best for people who are self-directed, people who are curious, willing to experiment, and comfortable with figuring things out as they go. Because the truth is that the internet rewards people who build things. It rewards people who create content, develop skills, share knowledge, and provide value. And Gen Z understands that intuitively because they've spent their entire lives online. They've seen ordinary people turn hobbies into careers. They've watched creators build businesses. They watch developers launch apps, designers build brands, and writers create audiences. So instead of seeing the internet purely as entertainment, a lot of young people are starting to see it as an opportunity. And that mindset shift might be one of the biggest generational changes happening right now. The traditional college path isn't disappearing. Universities will always exist, and for many careers, they remain essential. But for the first time in decades, young people are seriously questioning whether it's the only path to success. And once people realize there are multiple paths available, the entire conversation around education starts to change. The real question becomes, what's the best way to spend the next 4 years of your life? For some people, the answer will still be college. For others, it might be learning skills online, building projects, freelancing, starting businesses, or exploring trades. But the important thing is that the decision is becoming more intentional. Gen Z isn't automatically rejecting college. They're evaluating it like an investment. They're asking what the return will be, what the alternatives are, and whether there might be a better way to reach the same destination. And that level of questioning might end up reshaping the future of education entirely. Because when an entire generation starts looking at the traditional path and asking, is there another way to do this? The system itself eventually has to adapt. And right now, that shift is just getting started.